Sit back and relax, get some coffee or tea while you're waiting. Again, we're going to start in about 1 or 2 minutes. All right, we still have some people logging in. So again, we're going to wait about 1 more minute and then we'll get started. All right, good morning, everybody. It looks like it's about 10:01, so we're going to go ahead and get started, even if people are starting to come in. So welcome to our Get a Grant workshop. We are so happy that you're here, and hopefully you'll learn some information about the 2 grants that we're offering and hope to get you some cool ideas that spark some motivation for this upcoming school year. So Kevin's going to go ahead and say something real quick, and then we will get started.
Yeah, hey folks, we're really excited that you're here with us. We do have a blended audience of both our Ag Literacy coordinators and our teachers. This is for the Ag Lit coordinators. All right, Steffi's going to talk about asking questions. If you have a program question and you're a coordinator, that means you get paid by Ag in the classroom, send those directly to me. Send those directly to me. Y'all know my email. Send those to me. If you have questions about the what about something like this, you can go ahead and drop those in the chat. But coordinators, if you have questions, let's not muddy this up for teachers. Let's send those questions directly to me. With that, I'll turn it over to Stephanie.
All right, thanks, Kevin. All right, so as Kevin said, I am going to take time at the very end of this presentation to answer any questions. So if you have questions throughout this workshop, go ahead and put those into the Q&A. And at the very end, I will do my best to answer the questions, or Kevin can help me out if I don't know the answer, but those are going to be at the very end. So any questions about the grants, about applying, about what we're looking for, anything like that, if I haven't answered during the workshop, go ahead and put those in the Q&A. If you do have resources to share or different ideas or anything, you can go ahead and drop those in the chat box so everybody can see them. Otherwise, any questions about this, put them in the Q&A. But we will go ahead and get started. Now, I know many of you probably got a lot of this information, or a little bit, when we traveled this summer for any of the summer ag institutes in the different counties. And for that, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on the books and the lessons. All of these lessons and all of the resources that I will be discussing in this workshop are going to be on a page on our blog. So when I end this workshop, at the very end, when we're done with questions and everything, and I hit leave, it will automatically send you to our blog page that will have the applications for both the project grant and the classroom book grant. It's going to have all of the lessons that I've discussed today. It's going to have all of the information about the grant, all of the specifics and the criteria, just like I'm going to go over. And then it's going to have additional resources, websites, magazine articles, things like that, that I'll point out. I also am going to be sending an email when this is done, just in case something happens to where you don't get to that blog page and you're not familiar with our blog page, which is www.beyondthebarndoor.wordpress.com. It is on the teacher training tab and it should be at the very top. But if for some reason you can't get there, I will be sending an email out that has the link to take you there and the link for the application. So don't worry about that. And then this is also being recorded, and I will also upload the recording to that same page just in case you want to go back or you forgot the answer to a question that we discussed at the very end, anything like that. Then the recorded video will be up there as soon as it's downloaded on my computer. But with that, here we go. Welcome to our Ag in the Classroom Get a Grant workshop. So today I'm going to start with the book grant information. I'm going to talk about the different books in the various categories that we're offering. I'm also going to talk about different lessons that you can attach or pair with those books. And then I'm going to go over a handful of examples from our previous recipients, just to kind of give you more ideas and things that we're looking for. Then I'm going to go into the project grant information. And again, I'm going to talk about all of the criteria and everything that goes along with that. And then again, go into some examples of our previous recipients. Again, at the very end, I'm going to answer any questions. So put those into the Q&A box throughout the workshop, and we will go back to that at the very end. If it comes down to 11 o'clock and you need to get going, and for some reason we're going over because sometimes I can talk a lot, I will try to keep it just this 1 hour, but feel free to log off at 11 o'clock or really anytime you need to. And again, this will be recorded and up there for you. So we're going to go ahead and start with the book grant. So our classroom book grant, basically the whole purpose of this is to use literature to teach an aspect of agriculture in your classroom. We want you guys to teach kids about soil science and pollination and any aspect of agriculture, how, where does our food come from, anything like that. And we want you to use literature to bring that into your curriculum and into your classroom. So the books that you're choosing, they should incorporate into a project, a couple lessons or a unit study, something that you're teaching about agriculture using these books. So one thing about the books is that we get these books at the publisher's bulk discount price. So it's about half of the price that they would normally sell if you go to Amazon or anything like that. So we are giving you up to $250 to get a various amount of books within those different categories. So essentially you're getting about $500 worth of books for $250. So the application deadline is going to be October 15th, 2021. So this coming October, you have a couple months to figure out kind of how you want to incorporate these books into your classroom and fill out the application. The application is very easy, very user-friendly. We've heard from many of our previous recipients that it took them, very, very little time to fill out the grants. So I know sometimes when you think of grants and writing grants and all of that, it can seem very stressful and very, overwhelming, but these are really easy to fill out. Once that October 15th deadline comes along, we will gather all of them, we'll read through all of them, and then we will choose who those winners are. So anybody who is going to receive the grant is going to be notified by November 12th or on November 12th. So about a month later. You will then receive all of the books closer to December so that you have all of your spring semester to complete your project or lessons or unit study, whatever you fill out the grant is that what you're doing, you have the entire spring semester to get that done. And then your final report is going to be due on May 27th. So I missed one. Let me back up. The funding agreement. So after we notify you and that you have won the grant, then we do require a funding agreement. So that's going to need to be signed, completed and signed by December 10th. And then you'll get all of your materials, your books, and then you'll have the spring semester. So the way that this works is that we have 4 different categories of that you can choose from. So our first category is going to be STEM in agriculture. Our second category is biographies in agriculture. Our third category is insects and pollinators. And then our last category is going to be our junior, senior high, or upper elementary novels. So you get to choose books from one of those categories. And there's about 4 to 5 books for each category. Actually, there might be a couple more in the STEM, but you can order one, a classroom set of one book, or you can get, a handful of each of the books in that category. It's just going to depend on how you are going to use them in your classroom. So let me go and show you what these books are. So our very first category is going to be STEM in agriculture. So we have a new series that we've discovered called Makers Make It Work. And they all have cute little stories. There is a narrative for each one of them. And throughout each one, there's going to be different questions and examples of experiments and building. And they're all going to be STEM related, and you can relate them all back to agriculture. So we have the Great Pumpkin Smash, How to Grow a Monster, Time to Shine, The Broken Bee's Nest, The Runaway Chicken, and Slime King. And from their covers, you can get a good idea of what each book is about. So for example, the Great Pumpkin Smash, we have a pumpkin catapult lesson that you could use as one way to incorporate this into your classroom. So students will use, the way that we wrote it is that they're using popsicle sticks and a spoon or a bottle cap and rubber bands to create a catapult. And then we created some different student worksheets where they will test out their materials. So they can draw their blueprint in the box, look at their materials, talk with their group, draw the blueprint, and then they can how far did they launch their mini pumpkin candy or whatever you're using to launch. And so then they're testing different trials. You can measure and record the distance that it traveled, the angles that were used. You can go into the history of catapults and all of that kind of stuff. So this is our pumpkin catapult activity, and it pairs very nicely with the Pumpkin Smash STEM book. Then with the Broken Bee's Nest, very straightforward. We have a Build a Bee hotel. These are becoming pretty popular, and we have the directions. This is actually a snip from our Pollinator Ag Mag, an awesome nonfiction source that could also be paired in the project or unit that you're using this with. But the Build a Bee hotel would be a great project, hands-on STEM activity that you can pair with this STEM book. Our Slime King. So kids are super into slime. It's fun, it's gooey. And so one activity that we thought would pair awesome with this is our Oobleck. So we're looking at the non-Newtonian material. So is it liquid? Is it a solid? What are the different states of matter? What are other products that are in that same, it can be a liquid, it can be a solid. So we're looking at the Oobleck, and so you're using cornstarch and water, and you're looking at those different materials. Of course, you can also make slime, but in this case, you can look at cornstarch and how does cornstarch, where does it come from? What is the supply chain from field to cornstarch? What are other products that we grow corn for? All of that sort of thing. Then we have these last two, lots of fun things that you can do. I included our STEM student worksheet just to give them ideas. What is the problem or challenge that they're facing? What materials were they given? what questions came up through their experiment, drawing their blueprint, adding some different observations, maybe different graphs, depending on what you're looking at. But with the runaway chicken, a STEM activity could be, well, what is the perfect chicken coop? What do chicken coops require for the health of the chicken? Is there a certain, temperature and lighting or humidity that chickens require? What about the perches? Where do they lay eggs? All of that fun stuff. So a lot of things that go into just a chicken coop that you wouldn't normally think takes a lot of that attention. So this would get their ideas rolling. And then again, looking at that ag side about chickens and eggs and poultry in general, where do we get these? Where are they raised? All of that. Time to shine, we're looking at a little solar oven, super popular to do in schools. So you can have them create their own little solar oven using this little STEM sheet, or if you have your own lessons that you've already done this with, lots of different ideas online for how to build a solar oven. You could also then continue that idea of renewable energies. Have them create a windmill. We've got windmill activities, all sorts of stuff. So those are using just the STEM worksheets for those. Then we have how to grow a monster. Now this idea is pretty cool, is growing enormous sized vegetables. And so if you are a third grade teacher, we do have this, and it's not from us, but Bonnie Cabbage program. Basically, you can sign up if you're in third grade, and then you'll get cabbage seeds sent to you, and then your students will grow their cabbages and see how big they can grow them. And then if you can see all of these students around, they take pictures with their cabbage and then they send them in. And it's just a really fun project, really looking at gardening, teaching kids where their food comes from, how to actually, care for plants and what they require for growth and survival. So lots of fun things, but this is a really fun contest, and it can be paired with this book if you're in a third grade class. Okay, moving on to our second category, biographies in agriculture. So we have Lincoln Clears a Path by Peggy Thomas, The Superlative A. Lincoln by Eileen Meyer. We have Erosion. This is the story of Hugh Bennett. So back in the Dust Bowl, when Hugh Bennett studied soil science and noticed that when we have really dry areas and, within that whole time of the Dust Bowl, that something needed to change so that farmers weren't losing their soil and we had, healthy soils to grow our food from. And so studied lots of soils all around and did end up convincing lawmakers to put into law about soil health. And that's actually how the NRCS was started. So the Natural Resources Conservation Service is what we know as today. And that's how that all got started, because of Hugh Bennett and his love for soil. Then we have Buzzing with Questions, and this is by Janice Harrington. And this is a story on Charles Henry Turner. And so just a fantastic story, not a very well-known scientist, but he paved the way for a lot of the current day studies that we have. So on bees and bee vision, behavior of ants. Basically, he recognized that bugs don't just, mindlessly kind of fly around or move around, that they have strategic behaviors based on the stimuli that they are introduced to. So anything in their environment, they have to make, they react in strategic ways, where most people at that time thought that bugs were just dumb and just kind of wandering around. Then we have Nachos by Sandra Nickel. And this is the story of Ignacio Nacho Anaya, and basically how he created our world's favorite snack as nachos. So it goes into depth with his hometown and upbringing and heritage and the story behind what it took for him to create and get the word out about these. Then we have Try It And this is by Mara Rockcliffe, and this is the story on Frida Kaplan. Basically, in the 1960s, she became a salesperson and was out on the streets in the marketplace and introduced a load of various fruits and vegetables that no one had even heard of, in the United States. And so she brought them from all around the world, things like kiwi fruit, star fruit, mushrooms. And so it's kind of cool of how those somewhat staple foods or very well-known fruits and vegetables today were introduced at that time and no one had known about them. So let's move on. So these are your books that you can choose from. Again, if you wanted, to do something on food and nutrition, you could half of the amount of your grant, you could fill out to say, I want, 20 books from Nachos, and the other X amount for Try It. Or you could just choose one, or you could just choose 5 of a few. It's going to depend on what you're thinking and how you're going to use them in your classroom to teach a concept of agriculture. Okay, so a couple lessons that could be paired with our Lincoln books, our Lincoln patent. So President Lincoln is the only president of the United States that holds a patent, and it is a flotation device for boats to get through really shallow waters. And so we have some primary resources that students can look at and do some critical thinking and read it. And it's in cursive, but we do have the printed text down there. And then for them to design something similar to his patent. So rethinking it is that extension. For Nachos, we have a recipe, tortilla in a bag. So showing students how tortillas are made, the different ingredients that go into making these tortillas. And then of course you can consume them in your classroom if that's an option for your school, or just make nachos with them. You could also pair that and with Try It, our new coriander and cilantro cuisine. And this goes into the idea that there are different plants out there where different parts of that plant are used in many, many different ways. So coriander and cilantro, they're the same exact plant. Coriander is going to be the seeds, the cilantro is the leaves, and what types of dishes are they used in, and where in the world are they used most? Do some cultures use cilantro more in different dishes versus the actual coriander, the spice? So that would be a fun thing for your students to look into and look into recipe. Again, with our tortilla in a bag, cilantro is a very popular garnish for nachos. And so you could definitely do both of these activities and learn about cilantro and nachos, and then garnish your tortillas or your nachos, all in the same time. So 2 birds with 1 stone, right? So those are some of our biographies. Our last couple biographies, Erosion, we do have our Plato core sampling where students are looking at the makeup of the soil, looking at the different parts of soil, sand, silt, and clay, and using Plato to take some core samples and talking about why that's important. What do farmers do with their soil? How do they make sure that their soil is healthy and has the appropriate nutrients, or if it doesn't, what do they do? And then again, if you've been with us recently, we did talk about the 4 R's of soil. So the right rate, the right time, all of that, which can be found in our soil ag mag. So farmers are they're not gonna spray their entire fields with fertilizer if only a section of it needs those extra nutrients. And so what are farmers, current day farmers doing to make sure that they're still protecting the environment, but also, growing enough food to feed the world? And then buzzing with questions. So again, this one about Charles Henry Turner. He was the first behavioral scientist, and he was categorized into a lot of different science roles: zoology, behavioral science, a whole bunch. He did all sorts of awesome work, but he was the first behavioral scientist that paid close attention to the use of controls and variables within experiments. So we know how important controls and variables are when you're doing any sort of experiment, any sort of inquiry. and any sort of STEM. And so he was one of the first to really pay close attention to what that meant. And so I included our scientific inquiry worksheets. So if you're doing a basic experiment in your classroom, this is a very generic worksheet that students can use to kind of help them go through, what is the phenomenon that they're looking at? What do they already know about it? What are the materials? What are they choosing as their control? What are their variables? All of that kind of stuff. So that's our scientific inquiry worksheet. Works very, very nicely with buzzing with questions. All right, insects and pollinators. So we have Honeybee, The Busy Life of Apis mellifera by Candace Fleming. We have Give Bees a Chance by Bethany Barton, Butterflies Belong Here by Deborah Hopkinson, and then Flowers Are Calling by Rita Gray. So these are our 4 insect and pollinator books, and that's in that section. So one of our activities is powder-powered pollination, and this is just teaching kids how does pollination work. So it's using some sort of powder. You could use the yellow powder for mac and cheese. You could use the Kool-Aid powder, any sort of powder. And then we have little flower templates that you can print, and then students will have a little pipe cleaner. And then when they travel from flower to flower, each flower will have a little bit of that powder on there. And so as they're and you put them on little juice boxes, and then as their little butterfly goes to drink the nectar, they'll start to notice that the powder gets stuck on the pipe cleaner. And so then you can talk about the little hairs, on our different insects, and you can talk about different pollinators in general. But that is our powder-powered pollinator. Pairs with many of these activities, all of them, in fact, but especially with Butterflies Belong Here. Flowers Are Calling. So we do have our throw and grow activity, and in our pollinator ag mag, this is just a snip from it that goes over some of our native flowers. And so the Flowers Are Calling is really looking at the different colors of flowers. How do flowers communicate with insects, or how do insects know that they have pollen? Really cool look at the communication aspect. And so then again, you can turn that into, well, what types of native Illinois native flowers are there, and why are they super important for our pollinators? And then of course our throw and grow, many of you already know, but basically just putting little wildflower seeds with some clay and soil and then tossing it out. You're throwing it and then it's growing. Our Honeybee and Give Bees a Chance. Honeybee really does take you through the life. It's just a beautiful paintings, really well written, very scientifically accurate about a honeybee and what it does and how it grows and what its jobs are within the hive and outside of the hive. Candace Fleming did a fantastic job writing this. One of my absolute favorite pollinator books. And then Give Bees a Chance is really looking at, this idea that many people are afraid of bees, whether they're allergic or not. They kind of have a bad name, but that most bee species aren't out to get you. And it just really highlights a lot of the positive aspects and why bees, many different species of bees, are important. So we have a brand new lesson called The Bee's Knees and More, and this is about the anatomy of a honeybee. And so as you can see on the screen, there is a template that shows a honeybee with all of everything labeled. And then there's flashcards where it highlights different parts, all of the different parts that are labeled. And so like on one flashcard right here with the wings, only the wings are colored. And so then on the back side, it'll talk about the location on the bee's body, and then the function. What is it used for? And so you can either print those, back to back or single side and put them, a yellow hexagon in between, however you want to do them, but they are flashcards. So students can learn about the different parts. And then there actually is a blank template with a word bank at the bottom for students to quiz themselves. It would be more of a formative or even summative assessment to see if students learned about all the different bee parts. The great thing about this is that a lot of these different parts you can compare and contrast with different types of insects or different pollinators, and the uses. Most of them are going to be used for the same things. And so, looking at the shape and how it might make, them fly faster or fly in different directions, or, any of those topics. And then this is also another snip in the bottom right-hand corner. Other important pollinators. This is from our Pollination Ag Mag. And so it just talks about, well, we are very, very familiar with butterflies and bees being pollinators, but what other creatures would be considered pollinators? So other different insects, bats, little mammals, all of that sort of stuff. So you can definitely expand that topic into it being more than just butterflies and bees. Okay, our very last category is novels. We're looking at grades 5th through 12th. So we have Prairie Lotus. We're looking at a modern day or an up-to-date Little House on the Prairie, but focused on a Chinese American family. The Thing About Luck is looking at a Japanese American family and working during wheat harvest. Chirp is focused on cricket. Raising crickets for protein to sell as food. We have Sorry for Your Loss, which is dealing with a family that is dealing with the death of a family member, one of the sons, and the perspective is from the brother, and just going through all of his emotions and dealing with the family and their emotions, but also then how food can bring everyone together from different backgrounds, different cultures, people going through different situations, and how food and different dishes can really bring us together in the times that we may need it the most. Free Lunch is looking at the free lunch program. Students who are on the free lunch program, and our main character and his feelings about being there and how he's dealing with it in junior high and all of that. And then Flip the Bird by Kim Brunner. We're looking at falconry and animal rights, which definitely can connect into agriculture. Okay, so for Sorry for Your Loss, we do have Hungry Planet Gallery Walk, looking at that idea of foods and cultural foods. So our Hungry Planet, if you're not familiar with that, fantastic book. And it looks at a variety of families from around the world. The authors went out and they said, we'll buy you a week's worth of groceries if we can take a picture of you with all of those groceries around. And how much is it going to cost and what's in there. And so at the bottom left-hand corner, I know it's a little bit hard to see, but there's a couple pictures of two of the families in that book. And you can definitely see there's a huge difference in not only the amount of food that they have for one full week, but there's a lot of differences in the types of foods that they have. So you can definitely start talking about the idea of foods around the world, nutrition, and all of that, and connect that back to Sorry for Your Loss. Flip the Bird, we have a discussion guide that you can do with that, looking into really critically thinking about different parts of the book. Our discussion guide also has vocabulary included, and then additional resources that look more into falconry. And then a huge part of this is talking about, with falconry in the book, there is, it's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet. Our main character is raising falcons like his family always has. And then he meets a girl who he just thinks is just so beautiful and so awesome. But her family is a part of this organization called HALT, which is an animal rights group. And they get a little crazy at times, but they end up it's like Romeo and Juliet. And so, what happens with that, but looking at that idea of animal rights and, where do we draw the line in certain instances? And so those are some discussions that you can have. This book is definitely for your upper level grades. I would say 8th grade at the minimum, but high school is more appropriate for this book. And then with free lunch, you could definitely start talking about, well, what is the history of free lunch? When and where did this get started? What are the programs that started providing milk for schools? And then looking at, where does milk even come from? Looking at that dairy side. There is a website called whereismymilkfrom.com, and you can every thing of milk has a little code, and you can type it in to that website, and it'll tell you which factory it was bottled in, where did it come from. And so, maybe you live in the southern part of the state, and your milk came from, way up north. And then you can definitely get into talking about the supply chain with that. You could also talk a social studies side of this in history. So looking at the Johnson era in 1964, he did give the State of the Union address and talked about the war on poverty. And that was led into, all the free lunches and providing nutrition for schools for students who didn't have those means. All right, Prairie Lotus. So we have sweater, weather, weaving. So in Prairie Lotus, her family works for a textile. They make their own clothes. And so you could definitely talk about, well, where does, what sort of fabrics do our clothes come from? Is it a newer day synthetic fabric? Is it wool that comes from animals? Is it something that comes from plants? And so looking at the different types of fabrics, and not only that, but then, well, how do we get them together? So you could have them braiding bracelets. You could have them just make little basket weavings, lots of things that you could do with that. But specifically with the making of their own clothes, we provided sweater, weather weaving. For Chirp, there's a lot of fun things that you could do, but especially edibleinsects.com, you can order all sorts of different flavored bugs, crickets, mealworms, scorpions, all sorts of stuff. And so you could look into the idea of entomophagy, so the practice of eating insects. And all around the world, people eat insects, like it's nothing. And that just sounds really disgusting here in the United States. And so that's another way you can look up into different cultures, the history of eating bugs. You can look into all of that fun stuff. And then you can order some chocolate coffee flavored crickets, or barbecue crickets for your students to try. And then anyone who tries it, you could give them a fun little pin that they ate a bug. So super fun things that you can do with that. How to raise bugs. You could, get a little ant farm and raise some ants in your classroom and do all sorts of fun stuff. And then wheat milling with the thing about luck. So wheat harvest, we have the thing about luck, and our wheat milling activity is looking at the different parts of wheat, the seeds, crushing them. And then you could even use a pepper grinder to grind them to create flour. So lots of cool things that you can do there. So some of the examples from our previous recipients, up here on the left-hand side, we have a 6th grade teacher who we had a couple of years ago there, we had a category of graphic novels. And so some of them were, Levi Strauss, so we're looking at Blue Jeans, and then The Great American Dust Bowl. And so this teacher compared and contrasted those books. And then they also had reader stories, The Gardener, that takes place during the Great Depression, and then the Kids Invention book about kids inventing things and the process and all of that. And so he used 2 of our books and had the students read those and read those other 2 books and compared and contrasted them. Then he had students get into small groups, do some research, and then they got to choose, how to proceed with the research, how they were going to present their information, whether it was a PowerPoint or a poster, or maybe there are lots of examples. And then he had them focus on the agricultural aspect and the way that ag played a part or had an effect on the outcome of those stories. So a lot of cool things, but he definitely had them focus on that outcome. How did ag play a role in the outcome of the Dust Bowl, in the outcome of the Great Depression, and the outcome of inventing, things like blue jeans. Down here in the middle, we have a 5th grade teacher who had students complete a wax museum. So they would research, dress up like the historic figures, and then they had to give a speech. And so in that year, there were some historical books. And so those were the books that they had written the grant for, and then they used those books to help provide additional research at, instead of just using the internet, these were hands-on books that they could use. And then they had to dress up and, give a speech. So they did the wax museum and became that character. And they definitely had to talk about how their character made an impact in the world of agriculture. So there's how they tied that in. Up at the top right-hand corner, we have an 8th grade teacher who used pollination books to look at, to create lessons. And then they had 1st grade science buddies, and they had to read the book to them and then do their short lesson that they wrote with their 1st grade buddy. And they did also have to provide a snack, and it was all related to pollinators. And so an example that was given was how bees make honey, and then they did honey tasting. So another example was doing a bee dance, and then they created a bee dance to do with their 1st grade buddy. Another student had looked at the anatomy of bees and butterflies, and taught about that. And then of course the pollination process and writing stories. So those were some examples that their students came up with in the class to teach their 1st grade science buddies. And lastly, in the bottom right-hand corner, we have a 3rd grade teacher who invited one of our Ag in the Classroom county coordinators into their class once a month to present. And so then what the presentations that our coordinator did paired with the themes of the books that they had for their grant, the books that they had asked for. And then they basically introduced and reinforced not only science topics, but also agricultural topics. And they use graphic novels and other various informational texts. So you can see there's a wide variety of ways that the books were used in their classrooms. Lots of really cool things that you can do. Okay, so our project grant. Okay, so, and I hope I'm not talking too fast. I just want to make sure we have time for questions at the very end. So our project grant, this is the purpose of this is to create a project that's valuable to your students. It really helps them understand agriculture, or one aspect of it. Agriculture is such a broad idea. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with this, and you'll see when we get to the recipient winners what I mean by that. So basically, when you're writing this grant, it is for materials to do a project. Now, this needs to be a standalone project. It can't be, like if you wanted, if you're redoing your science lab and you got a whole bunch of money from, your school or this other grant, and then you need a little extra. We want it to be a standalone project. It needs to be unique to itself. So the grant should focus on materials that can also be used over multiple school years. So nothing consumable, nothing towards field trips, because that's not enough money to take a class on a field trip. But it should be something that can be used over and over multiple times, so that you get your money's worth with these materials. So the amount is up to $300. Everything else, all of the dates are exactly the same as the book grant. So the application deadline is October 15th. We will notify you on November 12th. We will send you the funding agreement for you to complete and sign and return that by December 10th. And then you'll have the spring semester to complete your project. And then your final report will be due on May 27th, 2021. So again, in the bottom right-hand corner, it says no funding for field trips, landscaping, plants incubators. The state of Illinois has so many incubators. If I'm sure you can find somebody, or if you want to do some sort of incubation, reach out and we can put you in contact. There are so many incubators, so we're not going to provide any more money for those. And then no consumable items. But otherwise, all of the deadlines and everything are the same. So here are some different examples. Up in the left, upper left-hand corner, we have a 4th grade teacher. The materials that they requested through the grant were the Hungry Planet series and What the World Eats, and that both of those are written by Peter Menzel and Faith D'Aluzio. And so all about nutrition, and I had already shown you those pictures previously of the 2 families. And so this teacher had developed an online program with coding, and it allowed students to see the impacts of erosion on farming land. And so then the materials that, so based on those books and going through all the information, then they had to build a model and see how erosion changed the land. And so they're really looking at different soil around the world, different farming techniques, and especially the soil and the dryness and the nutrients in that, and how that can be very damaging, how erosion and unhealthy soil can be very damaging to farmland. Down here, we have a 6th grade teacher. The grant materials that they requested were cell models, cell puzzles, and microscopes. And so they use that in their classroom to learn about the parts of plant cells and of animal cells, and how the functioning of each of those parts. So of course, animal cells are really important because they make up animals like our livestock, and same with plants. They make up the plants that we are growing and eating, or using for, byproducts and all of that. And so definitely that even though we're looking at cells, typically if you're thinking about cells in microscopes, you're not really thinking, well, that's agriculture, but you can see how you can tie that into your classroom, because plants and animals are made up of cells and they function in very specific ways, and they need certain nutrients, and the processing and how they intake those are really important for us to understand. So our 6th grade teacher had requested those materials. Another winner, a 3rd grade teacher, had requested materials to build a small greenhouse. They already had a 3rd grade garden at their school. And so she had requested materials to build a small greenhouse around that garden for protection, and then to talk about greenhouses and their uses. And all of that, and for students to be able to go in at, any rain or shine, they could go into their greenhouse and work in the garden. Up at the top right, we have an 8th grade teacher. The grant materials they requested was things for hydroponics. So the hydroponics kit, PVC pipe, hoses, all of that. And basically it turned into an aquaponics project where not only were they looking at hydroponics and growing plants, with water, but also then it was connected to a tank where they had goldfish living in the tank. And so the students then had to maintain, proper pH levels. They had to make sure everything was flowing and running. And they definitely had to look at the germination of the seeds and, what factors are going to make these plants healthier? What's going to have them get them to have stronger stems or greener leaves, but also any changes that they made to try to study that. They had to track and create graphs and collect data to make sure that everything was functioning correctly. And the last one that I want to share is from a high school foods class. And so this teacher had requested kitchen scales. And so the way that this teacher had used the scales in her classroom was to weigh different cuts of meat. And so she had a scale for each of the different kitchen stations in her room. And then they weighed, fruits and vegetables and different cuts of meat. And then she completed our meat of the matter lesson, which really looks at how much of the meat do we use. And so you can use different fruits like grapes. you're not wasting a whole bunch. I mean, just the stem part, but the whole fruit we eat. Whereas maybe a pineapple, you're going to have more waste because we only eat the inside. We don't eat the core, we don't eat the leaves, we don't eat that outer part. So there's a lot more waste with a pineapple than a grape. And so connecting that then to not only just the fruits and vegetables that may create more or less weight, but also then meat and animals in general. If we're only eating the meat section of animals, what is happening to all of the rest of their body? So you could absolutely look into different byproducts and different uses for the animal so that there's not a lot of waste. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. So I want to take a moment to look at different questions. Before I go to the next page, now both of these links will be emailed to you and they're on the blog page that you'll get sent to when this is done. And real quick, I want to just say, please check out our blog. We have tons and tons of resources on here, not only just our lessons, but we have lots of cool videos, our bee school and our gardening videos, lots of cool things that you could utilize in your classroom for a different type of learning. And then of course, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We are sharing lots of different things, especially during the school year. And so look forward to some upcoming things that we'll be sharing each month for our monthly themed activities. But let me go back. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and we will answer some questions. So let me go to the Q&A. So if you have any questions, go ahead and add them to the Q&A. Kevin, is there anything that you want to go more into detail, or if I skipped anything?
Just one thing real quick. We put the list together of the books in May, and I checked with the publishers in May. At this moment, right now, The Broken Bee's Nest is on back order. It is not available. That's one of the STEM books. Additionally, Flowers Are Calling, that's in our Pollinator book. That is not available. They're both scheduled for reprint, but don't have a date yet. Actually, I got information from Random House today, and it's still listed as back order. There are two that are available from that are in our high school reader section. Sorry for Your Loss and Free Lunch. I just can't get them. They aren't even giving me excuses. I just can't get them. So if we continue to have those problems, we'll let you know. But just so you know, I do buy direct from publishers on these, and trying to find them and get them. So they want to get them to us, but they're currently out of stock. Those four: Broken Bee's Nest, Flowers Are Calling, Sorry for Your Loss, and Free Lunch. One other thing, the Bonnie Cabbage program, Stephanie mentioned it. It's a really cool program. We will be promoting that, even if you don't use How to Grow a Monster. We'll promote that on our Facebook site. It really is a drawing. They send out the free cabbages, and then anybody who sends it in, they don't actually come and weigh and measure and that kind of stuff. But really cool program for your third graders to get involved with. So you do have a couple questions. Stephanie, I'll let you get to those.
Okay, so we have one question. It says, if my lesson goes with one of the books in the unit offered, is it okay to request all of the books in that unit for the book grant? Yep, absolutely. So like I said at the beginning, if you like for the pollinators, there's 4 options. So if you just wanted one, like Honeybee, if you just wanted to use that one single book to use in your classroom for your unit or your lessons, you can get the, order all of up to $250 of Honeybee. Or you could do a variety of all of those. Let's say, 5 of Honeybee, 5 of Bees Are Calling, 5 of, all of a sudden I can't think of the other Pollination, up to $250. So however, you're just picking one single category and then choosing the books in that category to use in your classroom, whether it's one of the books or a couple of the books. You have $250 for one category. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that correctly? Okay. So it's up to you and how you want to use it. So absolutely, it's just going to depend on what you're thinking for your project or your lesson. So absolutely, that was a great question. Can you choose books from a lower grade level? Absolutely. So even if you're teaching sixth grade, you can definitely use, Honeybee. At any grade level, there's something to learn. Now, if you're in high school, you're not gonna, to use Honeybee. They're gonna have already learned things like that. But if you're in, teaching sixth grade, absolutely, you can go to those lower levels. Are there any restrictions with that, Kevin? No? Okay, awesome. Yeah, so again, it's going to depend on what you're teaching in your classroom and how you're going to use them. And so as long as we're seeing, through your grant and how you're going to use them, if we think, yeah, that's an awesome idea. One thing that we do talk about is we have a Dr. Seuss book called Oh Say Can You Seed? And of course, when you're thinking Dr. Seuss, it's elementary school, but the topics and terms and the information in there is it's can be for so many different levels, and you can use it. So some of our students at higher levels or at the higher grades may not be at that reading level, and so picture books could also help them, or maybe it's helping students just make that connection between certain scientific information. So definitely you can use them in different grade levels.
Hey, let me take the next one here, Stephanie.
Sure.
Would book grants for the Bee Hotel, books, STEM, pairing include any other supplies? Danny, we have two grants. You can either apply for the book grant or you can apply for the supplies grant. Now, if you want to apply for both, I'm going to give you a hint. Get the teacher next door to you to apply for one. All right. Let's not be greedy. All right. Let's spread the love, that kind of stuff. But you're either applying for the book grant or for the project grant. So I have two grants. It doesn't really work to combine them. We're trying to make it work. So there's that. So hopefully that answers your question. Get the neighbor next door to apply for a project grant. Lisa, you can't pick books from other units, correct? You can pick books from as many units as you want. Right now, it's $250 is that limit that you're looking for. Remember, if you look at the price of these books, basically I'm getting them half price. So you're getting $500 worth of books. So Lisa, if you apply for 5 different book grants and you apply for $1,200, you're probably not going to get it. But you could apply for 3 $75 grants and you'd probably get that. Rachel asks, can you choose books from 2 different categories? Chirp or the pollination set? That's fine. Again, you're going to apply for 2. It's only going to let you apply for 1 grant at a time. Keep it under that $250 limit. We include the list of books not available. It's not that they're not available. Sorry. So Teresa, it's not that they're not available. They're not available at this moment. Can we switch to another? Yeah, I'll try and fill out the book. So if you ordered some of the Broken Bees, I would probably give you a call and say, I can't get it. How about 5 extra pumpkins instead? Something like that. The way the document is only lets you choose books from 1 category. Teresa, I think I just answered that again. So you can go ahead and apply for the Chirp ones that you want, but don't apply for $250 if you also want to order some of the Honeybee ones. Keep your total at $250. And I'll also stress our folks like to fund full projects. I know there'd be a great $10,000 thing you'd like, and this $300 might put you over the top. We don't like to fund those. They like to see a complete project. I will also say that these books are going to go, there's a funding agreement. You are not getting a check. I am not writing a check to Stephanie Hospelhorn. Sorry, Stephanie, not going to happen. It'll go to your school. It'll go to your school. That's where you're going to get a funding sign off from your principal. So make sure your principal knows this, that it's coming. If you don't fill out the final forms at the end, we'll be bugging them. You don't want to be getting a call on May 31st from your principal saying, hey, you didn't fill out the form. We need our money back or the form filled out. Please don't do that. So many good books. That's a good thing. Do you think some of them will come back next year? Hard to say. There's lots of good books out there. Additionally, one of the things that hopefully you mentioned, Stephanie mentioned a couple of them, we really try and feature Illinois authors. If I Can Get Sorry for Your Loss. It's my favorite book by Illinois author Jessie Ann Foley. Also Honeybee by Candace Fleming, another great Illinois author. Same thing with Flip the Bird and The Thing About Luck. So will they be back? Hard to say. Don't know what they will be coming up with. So our ag mags that were released this year included pollinators. So that's why you see some emphasis on pollinators. We have corn, so we made sure we put in nachos, of course, pumpkins, and so the great pumpkin smash. We also had that really cool apple and pumpkin poster that you were able to see. So we try and make the themes that are available for our ag mags that are coming out, plus also themes that are important within the agricultural industry. So and what's available out there. Like to feature new books. I will say Flowers Are Calling is a couple years old. That might be part of the problem for it going out of print and not being able to get it. So good news is we like to spread the love and show them all around. Plus, we like to have something from pre-K all the way through high school and make that available for you. So Stephanie, I think you got them all.
All right, yeah. All right, well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Again, if you have any further questions, feel free to send me an email. And like I said earlier, once we end this webinar, you should get taken immediately to our blog page that has all of this information. At the very top, you'll notice that of the blog page, there will be two links for the criteria. That's all the information about the deadlines. It has a list of the books for each category. And then just below that is going to be all of the lessons. And then below that even further is going to be all the different resources. So like the Where Is My Milk From .com, that's going to be on there, and even more resources that I included on there. Just as a lot of different examples of things that you could use in your classroom or just to get information from. So all of that will be on there. Chris also posted the link in the chat. So if you're worried about that, about not getting sent to that page, you can go ahead and click on there. I am going to upload our recorded version onto that page as well, but it's going to take a little bit of time. So it won't be up there right away. And then you will be receiving an email from me within the next hour that has that link that Chris just sent that will take you to our blog page, as well as the grant application links. So for both the book grant and the project grant. So otherwise, I don't think we have any more questions. Oh, you're muted.
I got one more thing. If you're looking for another author, Patty Tote, the author of Pick a Pumpkin and Pick a Pine Tree, will be at the Illinois State Fair on August 21st, Saturday, August 21st at the Specialty Growers tent. We'll also try and keep you in mind of what's going on with Illinois authors as they're making presentations throughout the state. But if you're looking for pumpkin activities to go along with the Great Pumpkin Smash, go along with that catapult, Patty Totes, the Pick a Pumpkin, she'll be there signing books and reading aloud on Saturday, August 21st.
All right, well, with that, we will go ahead and end our webinar, our workshop, and have a great rest of your Thursday afternoon. And hopefully you found this workshop to be informative and spark some